The sky above the kingdom of Urindor was always painted in shades of twilight, as if the sun and moon had agreed to share the sky forever. Shadows stretched long across the stone streets of the capital, and a cold, silver wind whispered through the towers and courtyards. It was in this kingdom of quiet gloom that Princess Alara had grown, a girl whose beauty and power were matched only by the fear that clung to her like a second skin. From the moment she could walk, she had been taught to fear the world beyond the palace walls. Her tutors warned her of humans, the unpredictable creatures who could be kind or cruel, gentle or dangerous, often without warning. And above all, she had been told that her fate was bound by prophecy. She would marry a human king, a man she had never seen, whose touch and words could shape the destiny of kingdoms. Alara hated that prophecy. She hated the thought of being bound to someone she did not know, forced to trust in a human who might betray her. She had lived her life among magic and shadows, trained to command power, to read the whispers of the wind, and to shape the world with her mind. The idea of being tied to a human, someone she could not control or predict, filled her with dread. Yet on the morning of the ceremony, a strange mixture of fear and curiosity stirred within her. The castle was alive with preparation. Servants moved like whispers along the halls, polishing silver, arranging flowers, and draping tapestries that fluttered in the cold breeze. The grand hall, where the meeting would take place, had been decorated with garlands of midnight roses and enchanted lanterns that glowed without flame, casting a soft, otherworldly light. Alara stood at the window of her chamber, her fingers tracing the cold stone sill. She wore a gown of deep sapphire, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like starlight on a frozen lake. Her hair, dark as the night outside, was pinned back with delicate crystals. She looked like a creature of twilight herself, beautiful and untouchable, yet her heart pounded with anxiety. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. "Your Highness," said her maid, a girl named Leora, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "It is time. The king has arrived." "Perhaps he is not what you fear, princess. Perhaps he is different." At the far end stood King Kale, a man she had only ever known through letters and rumors. He was taller than she had imagined, his shoulders broad, and there was a calm strength in the way he held himself. His hair was dark, his eyes a piercing green that seemed to see not the princess before him, but the truth she had hidden even from herself. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Alara felt her pulse quicken, her breath catching in her throat. She had expected fear, perhaps disdain, but there was none. Kale did not bow, nor did he make grand gestures of respect or awe. He simply looked at her, steady and attentive, as if he were trying to understand the mystery she had always been to herself. The ceremony began, slow and deliberate. Words of alliance and peace were spoken, the oaths of union recited in a language older than the mountains themselves. Alara's hands were cold, her magic humming faintly beneath her skin, restless and uneasy. She tried to focus on the words, on the ritual, but her attention kept returning to Kale. He did not smile, nor did he frown. He simply observed, patient and composed. Yet in his gaze there was something that unsettled her far more than any fear, curiosity. He seemed genuinely curious about her, as if he wanted to know the girl behind the crown, the heart behind the prophecy. As the final words of the ceremony were spoken, the magical bonds of the oath shimmered faintly in the air. Alara could feel the weight of destiny pressing against her chest, a cold reminder that her life was no longer entirely her own. And yet, there was a subtle warmth in Kale's presence, a softness that made her chest ache with both longing and fear. After the ceremony, the hall emptied, leaving only the two of them and the faint echoes of magic. Alara wanted to retreat, to hide in the safety of her chambers, but Kale's voice stopped her before she could move. "Princess Alara," he said, his tone low, almost gentle, "I do not wish to frighten you nor to demand anything that is not your choice, but I wish to understand you, not the prophecy, not the kingdom, but you. Will you allow me that?" No human had ever asked her such a thing, not truly. Curiosity battled fear within her, the part of her that wanted to trust warring with the part that wanted to flee. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure of what to say. Kale did not press her. He merely nodded as if he understood that trust must be earned, not commanded. "I will wait, then," he said. "But know this, I will not leave and I will not falter. You will not face this alone." That night Alara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling where the shadows danced like restless spirits. Her mind was a whirl of fear and wonder. Could she truly allow herself to hope? Could she truly believe that a human might not be the danger she had been warned of? And then she heard it. a whisper, faint and chilling, coming from the corners of the chamber. The union will be broken, the power must be taken. The prophecy had promised a union, but it had also promised trials, and in the depths of her soul, Elara felt the first stirrings of a new truth. She would not be a passive player in this story. She would fight, she would endure, and perhaps, against all warnings, she might even learn to trust the human she had been told to fear. Somewhere in the castle, Kale was still awake, walking quietly through the corridors. He too felt it, the whisper of shadows, the faint hum of magic that had begun to stir between them. For the first time, he realized that this was not just a union of kingdoms or power, but of hearts, fragile and fierce, and that the danger lurking in the dark was far more personal than either of them could have imagined. And so the night stretched on, long and silent, with the kingdom of Urindor holding its breath. Two hearts bound by prophecy and choice slept lightly, each haunted by shadows, each touched by hope. And far beyond the castle walls, the wind carried a warning that would not be ignored. The path ahead would be perilous, and the darkness waiting in the corners of the world was patient, cunning, and relentless. Elara did not know what awaited her in the days to come. But for the first time, she felt a spark of something she had never dared to imagine. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of trust, and the fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the human she was meant to marry could be unlike anyone she had ever known. The morning sun broke over the horizon, spilling soft gold across the kingdom of Urindor. The twilight of the night before had faded, yet the shadows clung stubbornly to the corners of the castle, curling along the walls like silent watchers. Princess Elara rose from her bed, her mind still tangled with thoughts of King Kale. He had remained in her thoughts all night, and though fear still lingered, so did a faint, inexplicable curiosity. Elara dressed carefully, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the deep blue silk gown that hugged her form. She had always been meticulous about appearances, for appearances were more than vanity in her world. They were armor. The prophecy had made her wary of all humans, and yet Kale had approached her differently. He had not bowed nor flattered her, nor attempted to impress her with words of power. Instead, he had simply looked, truly looked, and that simple act unsettled her more than any spell or sword. Leora entered, carrying a tray of tea and small pastries, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and worry. "Your Highness, he waits in the library," she said softly. "King Kale wishes to speak with you, if you are willing." She took a deep breath and nodded. "Very well, lead the way." Kale was already there, leaning against a carved wooden railing, a book open in his hands. When he saw her, he smiled, not the courteous, practiced smile of royalty, but a quiet, real smile that touched his eyes and softened the hard edges of his face. "Princess Elara," he said, his voice calm, yet full of warmth, "I am glad you came." She had not come because she wanted to be here. She had come because she was curious. Yet now, standing before him, she felt something shift within her. His presence was different from what she had expected, less imposing, more steady, as if he were not trying to claim her but to walk beside her. "King Kale," she said, her voice careful. "You wish to speak about me." Her tutors had taught her to guard her heart, to hide her thoughts, to reveal nothing. But here was a man who did not demand, who did not judge. And despite herself, she felt a flicker of something she had never experienced before, the desire to answer honestly. I do not know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Humans, they are unpredictable. I have been warned to fear you. And yet," she paused, searching for the right words, "and yet you are not like the others, you do not seem threatening. Ask your questions." She spoke of the lonely nights in the towers, of the forest she had explored in secret, of the way the wind carried messages that only she seemed to hear. Kale listened, never interrupting, never judging, his green eyes steady and attentive. At one point, he reached out and touched a small crystal on the edge of a shelf, causing it to glow faintly. "You have a remarkable gift," he said softly. "But gifts are not always burdens. They can also be bridges if one chooses to see them that way." She had always thought of herself as trapped, bound by prophecy and fear, yet here was someone suggesting a path she had never imagined, one that involved choice, trust, and perhaps even companionship. Yet fear remained. She had been warned of the dangers of trusting humans, of letting her heart be touched. And still she could not deny the warmth that stirred in her chest, a tiny ember of hope she had long believed dead. Days passed, each one bringing Kale closer in small, unexpected ways. He would find her in the gardens, asking about the plants and the creatures she had studied in secret. He would leave notes of encouragement in her chambers, simple words of respect and kindness. He did not demand her attention, yet he did not vanish either. Alara began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her magic, which had always been precise and controlled, reacted differently in his presence. A flame she conjured to light the hearth would dance higher when he smiled. A wind spell she summoned in the gardens would twist playfully around him, as if acknowledging his presence. She did not understand it, and part of her feared it, yet part of her marveled. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Cale found her alone in the library once more. He held a small book in his hands, one bound in deep leather with pages that glimmered faintly. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing it to her. It contains stories of humans who faced great fear and chose trust instead. "I thought, perhaps you would find them interesting." Humans were not simply creatures of unpredictability. They were capable of courage, patience, and understanding, perhaps even love. Yet as she read, a cold wind swept through the library, extinguishing the candles and causing the shadows to flicker. Alara's magic surged instinctively, illuminating the room with a soft, protective glow. Cale's eyes widened, not in fear, but in awe. "The shadows, they move differently around you," he murmured, "as if they are aware. Something that does not wish for this union to succeed." She was beginning to understand that Cale was different, not just in kindness, but in the way he touched her very being, stirring forces and emotions she had long buried. That night, as she lay in her chamber, Alara could not sleep. The shadows whispered again, faint but persistent, warning of betrayal and danger. She thought of Cale, his patience, his steady gaze, and the strange warmth he brought. Could she truly trust a human? Could she allow herself to hope? A sudden knock at the window startled her. A soft, glowing figure hovered outside, a messenger bird enchanted by Cale's magic. A small note was tied to its leg: "Do not fear the shadows. They are only part of the path. I will meet you at dawn." Alara clutched the note, her heart racing. For the first time, she felt a flicker of courage. Perhaps the human she was meant to marry could indeed be unlike anyone she had ever known. Yet deep within her, a warning persisted. The shadows were patient, the magic unpredictable, and the prophecy relentless. Trust was a dangerous thing, and she knew that giving even a small piece of her heart to Cale could change everything. And still, she could not resist. She found herself longing to see him at dawn, to speak with him, to learn more of the man who stirred both fear and hope in her heart. The kingdom of Erendor slept, but in the quiet corridors and shadowed towers, something ancient and watchful stirred. The union of Alara and Cale had begun, but the path ahead was fraught with danger, curiosity, and emotion neither of them fully understood. The threads of trust, fear, and longing were weaving a tapestry that would not be easily undone. And for the first time, Alara felt the true weight of her destiny, not as a prophecy to obey, but as a journey to choose. The morning fog lay thick across the kingdom of Erendor, softening the edges of the mountains and valleys like a veil. Princess Alara walked along the stone path of the palace gardens, her cloak drawn tight around her shoulders. The dew clung to her gown, and the scent of damp earth mixed with the faint perfume of midnight roses that had survived the night. She carried a small satchel, filled with herbs, charms, and a book of spells she had been studying in secret. Today was no ordinary day. Cale had requested her presence outside the castle, in the forest that bordered their kingdoms. Alara's heart raced with both anticipation and anxiety. She had learned to fear humans, their unpredictable nature, yet Cale had proven to be unlike any she had known. Still, the thought of venturing beyond the safety of the palace walls into a forest steeped with both natural and magical dangers made her uneasy. Her magic hummed faintly beneath her skin, restless and alert. When she reached the forest edge, Cale was waiting. He stood tall, as always, with an air of quiet confidence that both comforted and unnerved her. His green eyes caught hers, and for a moment she forgot the warnings of her tutors, the whispered prophecies, and the shadows that haunted the kingdom. "Good morning, princess," he said, his voice low and steady. "Are you ready?" Birds called in the distance, and the rustle of leaves whispered secrets she could not yet understand. Every step deeper into the forest made her magic stir, responding to the unseen energies that thrummed beneath the soil and between the trees. Cale walked beside her, his presence calm and steady. "Do you feel it?" he asked quietly. Alara glanced at him. "The magic. There is something powerful here, something that wants to test us." She knew that the forest was not merely a collection of trees and wildlife. It was alive in a way humans seldom understood, and the magic that lingered here could be as dangerous as it was beautiful. They walked in silence for a while, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the forest. Alara's nerves remained taut, but she also felt a growing sense of trust in Kale. He moved with ease, alert but unafraid, as though he were in tune with the rhythms of the land. For the first time, she considered the possibility that humans could be allies, not just unpredictable creatures to fear. Suddenly, the forest seemed to shift. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the temperature dropped. Alara instinctively drew a circle of protection around herself, her hands glowing faintly with magic. Kale's eyes narrowed, and he drew a small dagger from his belt, though it seemed more symbolic than necessary. From the shadows emerged creatures unlike any Alara had seen. They were neither entirely human nor entirely beast, their forms flickering between solid and ethereal. Eyes glowed with a strange, otherworldly light, and their movements were swift and deliberate. "Stay close," Kale whispered, his voice calm, yet tinged with warning. Alara felt a surge of fear, but also a strange clarity. Her magic pulsed, responding to the presence of the creatures. She raised her hands, and a soft barrier of light shimmered around them, deflecting the first strike of a shadowy claw. The creatures recoiled, hissing, and Kale lunged forward, his dagger striking with precision and skill. "Do not be afraid," he said, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. "We will face this together." She was not merely a princess bound by prophecy. She was a fighter, a wielder of power, and beside her, a human who respected her strength rather than trying to dominate it. Together, they were stronger than either had anticipated. The battle was swift but intense. Alara's magic and Kale's skill complemented each other, a dance of light and steel. The forest itself seemed to respond to their union, leaves and branches moving to shield them from attacks, roots twisting to trip their foes. And when the last of the shadow creatures dissipated into the morning mist, a silence fell over the forest that was almost sacred. Alara lowered her hands, her heart still pounding. Kale approached her, his expression a mix of admiration and relief. "You are incredible," he said softly. "I knew you had power, but I did not know it would be so alive." She had spent her life guarding against it, yet here it was, the most powerful force she had encountered. And it frightened her almost as much as the shadow creatures they had just faced. They continued their journey deeper into the forest, eventually arriving at a clearing where ancient ruins stood. Stone pillars, covered in moss and runes, reached toward the sky, their edges chipped and worn by centuries of wind and rain. In the center of the ruins was a shallow pool of water, its surface still and reflective. Alara felt the magic here immediately, a potent, almost overwhelming energy that pulsed through her veins. Kale approached the pool and knelt, dipping his hand into the water. The reflection of the sky shimmered and then shifted, showing visions of a possible future. Alara gasped. The visions were fragmented, showing a kingdom in flames, shadow creatures invading the palace, and a figure, herself, standing alone, her magic strained and faltering. Kale's hand remained steady in the water, and he looked at her with concern. "This place shows possibilities," he explained. "It does not decide what will happen, but it is a warning, a test of our bond and of our courage." For the first time, Alara considered that perhaps the prophecy was not a chain, but a challenge. Perhaps the darkness that had always haunted her was not meant to control her, but to teach her, and to test the bond she was beginning to form with Kale. Hours passed as they explored the ruins, deciphering the runes and testing the boundaries of the magic that lingered there. Alara's power responded in ways she had never experienced. A simple thought could make the stones hum, could stir the roots of trees to life, could summon gentle winds that caressed the clearing. And Kale was there, always patient, always attentive, never seeking to control, only to understand and support. By the time the sun began its descent, painting the forest in shades of gold and crimson, Alara felt both exhausted and exhilarated. She had faced shadows, wielded magic in ways she had not thought possible, and discovered a human who could stand beside her as an equal. Yet the shadows were not finished. As they began their walk back toward the castle, a chilling wind swept through the trees. The leaves whispered in voices she could barely hear, carrying warnings of betrayal and danger. Her magic tingled uneasily, reacting to forces unseen. Kale noticed her pause, his hand brushing against hers. "What is it?" he asked, his voice calm but alert. "Alara," a whisper seemed to hiss through the trees. "You are watched, your power, your bond, it is not yours to claim." The shadows of the forest were speaking, and their words carried a weight that made her knees weak. She looked at Kale, searching for reassurance, and found only determination in his gaze. "We will face it," he said simply. "Whatever is coming, we face it together." The forest had tested them, but it had also shown them that the dangers were far from over. Something beyond the creatures, beyond the magic, was watching. Something ancient, patient, and cunning. Alara's fingers tightened around her satchel. She realized that the path she had begun to walk with Kale would not be easy. Trust, she understood now, was not a gift freely given. It was a choice made in the face of fear. And she was beginning to make that choice, even as shadows gathered around them, unseen but undeniable. As they reached the edge of the forest, the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. The kingdom of Erendor lay before them, quiet and unaware, but Alara knew that the real tests were only beginning. The bond she was forming with Kale was a fragile thread in a tapestry woven with magic, prophecy, and danger. And the shadows that whispered warnings were patient. They would wait for the perfect moment to strike. Alara glanced at Kale, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the evening sky. She felt the stirrings of hope, of trust, and of a connection she could not yet name. But beneath it all, she felt the pull of destiny, the knowledge that the forest, the shadows, and the magic were all part of a trial that would shape the course of her life forever. And for the first time, she realized something she could not deny. The human she had been told to fear was becoming the one she might choose to trust, and perhaps, the one she might even hope to love. The castle of Erendor was quiet as night fell, yet the silence felt heavy, almost unnatural. Princess Alara walked along the shadowed corridors, her cloak brushing the cold stone floor. The echoes of her footsteps seemed louder than usual, mingling with faint whispers she could not place. Despite the forest adventure that morning, her heart remained unsettled. Kale had stayed by her side throughout the day, patient, calm, and attentive, yet the shadows of the castle felt different, watchful, alive, and waiting. Alara had begun to trust Kale in ways she had never thought possible. His presence made her magic stronger, yet it also made her vulnerable in ways that terrified her. For the first time, she realized that trust was not merely a choice. It was a force, a bond that connected two people in ways both subtle and profound. And tonight, that bond would be tested. Kale appeared at the end of the corridor, his expression steady but tense. "Alara," he said softly, "there is something you need to know." A group of nobles, envious of Alara's power and fearful of Kale's influence, had begun to conspire against them. Secret meetings, intercepted letters, and even subtle curses aimed at weakening Alara had been discovered. "They want to control you," Kale explained, his hand resting lightly on hers. "They do not care about the prophecy or the kingdom. They care only for power. And some of them, they will not hesitate to use your magic against you." "We must be careful," she said quietly. "If they discover the bond between us, they will try to break it." Kale moved among the nobles, learning their secrets, uncovering plots, and quietly protecting Alara without drawing attention to himself. Together, they were a formidable team, their bond deepening with every shared challenge. Yet the work was exhausting. Alara often found herself alone in the high tower, studying spells by candlelight. The shadows whispered at the edges of her mind, testing her resolve. At times, she felt her confidence faltering, unsure if her magic and her trust in Kale would be enough to protect the kingdom. One evening, Kale entered the tower quietly. He carried a small lantern that bathed the room in warm light, and a faint smile softened his usually serious features. "You've been at this for hours," he said gently. "Rest, Alara. Even the strongest magic cannot flourish without calm and clarity." "Then let me carry some of that burden," he said softly. "We face them together. You are not alone." She nodded slowly, allowing herself to lean slightly toward him, though she remained guarded. That night, a sudden disturbance shattered the uneasy calm. A magical alarm, hidden deep within the wards of the castle, flared brightly. Shadows stirred in the corridors, moving with unnatural speed and purpose. Alara felt a cold surge of energy, her magic reacting instinctively. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. Kale drew his dagger, and together they moved toward the source of the disturbance. The shadows that had been whispered about in the forest were now in the castle, moving through the halls with precision, attacking anyone who tried to intervene. It was not the creatures alone. They were accompanied by enchanted traps and wards designed to weaken Alara's power. "Stay close," Kale said, his green eyes fierce with determination. "We move together or we fail." She created a barrier of light that shimmered against the shadowy attackers, pushing them back while Kale struck with skill and precision. Together, they moved as one, an unspoken rhythm guiding their actions. Her fear was still present, but it was tempered by something stronger, a growing trust in Kale and in their bond. As the last of the shadows dissipated, the hall fell silent, save for the distant sound of the castle guards rushing to secure the area. Alara's chest heaved as she lowered her hands, her magic settling into a soft glow. Kale approached, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "I could not have done it without you." "Then let us keep that trust alive," he said. "No matter what comes, we face it together." Alara found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had never voiced to anyone, and Kale listened without judgment, offering guidance, strength, and quiet understanding. One evening, they found themselves alone in the gardens, under a sky painted with the colors of dusk. The air was still, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant song of birds returning to their nests. Alara's hands trembled slightly as she traced patterns in the soil, and Kale stood beside her, silent but attentive. "You have changed," Kale said softly, breaking the silence. "Since we met, I have seen you grow stronger, more certain, more alive. But I also feel something else, something I do not fully understand. That is something even magic cannot create. It is choice and courage and perhaps even love." His presence awakened something inside her she had never known, a feeling that mingled fear with hope, caution with longing. Before she could respond, a sudden chill swept through the garden. The shadows shifted unnaturally, and a faint, whispered voice reached her ears. "The bond will be broken, the power must be claimed." Kale's eyes narrowed, and he stepped beside her, his dagger drawn. Together they faced the unseen threat, their bond a shield stronger than any spell or weapon. For the first time, Alara understood the true nature of the prophecy. It was not merely about a union of kingdoms or a marriage of convenience. It was about the bond between two people, forged in trust, tested by fire and strengthened by courage. And that bond, fragile as it might seem, was a power unlike any other. As the night deepened and the castle settled into uneasy quiet once more, Alara felt a spark of hope. The shadows would come again, they always did, but she knew now that she was not alone. Kale was with her not as a protector but as a partner, and together they could face anything. Her heart, once guarded and fearful, was beginning to open. And in that opening, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel. The possibility that the human she had been told to fear might be the one who would help her face the darkness, and perhaps, the one who could teach her to trust, to hope, and maybe even to love. The first light of dawn touched the kingdom of Erendor with a soft, golden glow, yet the calm beauty of the morning belied the storm that was gathering beyond the castle walls. Princess Alara stood at the highest tower, her dark hair blowing gently in the wind, her hands resting on the cold stone railing. The forest and hills stretched far below, silent and watching, but the whisper of danger lingered in the air like a tensioned string. She had grown stronger in the days since her journey into the forest with Kale. Her magic, once cautious and measured, now pulsed with confidence and understanding. She had faced shadows in the castle, uncovered plots from those who sought to manipulate her, and learned to trust Kale in ways she had never imagined possible. Yet the prophecy still hung over her, reminding her that the shadows of destiny were patient, cunning, and relentless. Kale appeared at the top of the tower, his green eyes scanning the horizon before settling on her. He moved toward her with calm determination, his steps quiet on the stone floor. "The horn sounded," he said softly. "The forces beyond the kingdom are moving. This is no longer a test, it is the moment of choice. The prophecy, it demands action." Shadow creatures, larger and more terrifying than those in the forest, marched alongside mercenaries and humans swayed by the conspirators within the castle. The horns sounded again, calling the kingdom to war. The castle gates, normally a symbol of safety, were now the first line of defense against chaos. Alara and Kale descended to the courtyard, where soldiers readied themselves for battle. Alara's magic shimmered faintly around her, a protective aura that inspired courage in those nearby. Kale stood beside her, calm and commanding, giving orders and guiding the soldiers with precision. They moved as one, the bond between them visible in every glance, every gesture, every shared decision. "This is more than battle," Kale said quietly, leaning toward her. "It is a test of trust, of unity, of courage. Remember, the strongest magic is the bond between us." They moved swiftly, their forms flickering and shifting, testing the defenses of the castle. Alara raised her hands, her magic flaring as a barrier of brilliant light formed around the walls and gates. The shadows recoiled, and Kale's sword struck true, cutting through both mercenary and enchanted foe with skill and determination. The battle was fierce. Soldiers fought bravely, inspired by the presence of the princess and her human companion. Magic and steel intertwined, each movement a dance of power and precision. Ilara's spells deflected attacks, healed the wounded, and strengthened the resolve of those around her, while Kale's strategy and calm guidance turned chaos into order. Yet even as they pushed back the enemy, Ilara sensed a deeper threat. A figure, cloaked in shadows darker than night, moved through the battlefield with purpose. Its power was immense, its intentions malevolent, and it seemed to focus on her alone. "Ilara," Kale said urgently, sensing her unease. "Do not face it alone, we are stronger together." Her trust in Kale was absolute now. Together they stepped forward, their hands brushing, their hearts synchronized, their bond a shield stronger than any spell. The shadow figure revealed itself fully, a towering being, its form both human and monstrous, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. It raised its arms, and the wind shifted violently, scattering soldiers and throwing debris into the air. Its voice, deep and echoing, spoke directly into Ilara's mind. Her magic surged, bright and fierce, responding to both her fear and her courage. She looked at Kale, and in his gaze she saw the same determination, the same unwavering trust. They were not alone, they were united. "Power is not just about fear," Kale said, his voice ringing clear even over the chaos. "It is about connection, courage, and the choices we make. We are stronger together, and that strength is ours to wield." The shadow figure roared, its power striking at them again and again, but the bond between them held firm, a shield stronger than anything the shadows could conjure. The battle reached its climax in the heart of the courtyard. Soldiers had cleared the area, leaving only Ilara, Kale, and the shadow figure. It struck with a force that could have shattered walls, yet they stood unbroken, moving as one. Kale deflected attacks with precision, while Ilara's magic guided the flow of energy around them. "You are strong," the shadow figure hissed, its voice filled with both anger and curiosity. "But strength alone will not save you. Trust, courage, and love, those are the true powers, and we have them together." The shadow figure let out a scream that echoed across the kingdom, then dissolved into mist, leaving the battlefield silent except for the soft wind and the distant cries of the wounded. Ilara sank to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Kale knelt beside her, his hand holding hers, his presence a calm anchor amidst the aftermath. "You were incredible," he said softly. "I could not have faced that without you." The kingdom slowly began to recover. Soldiers tended to the wounded, the conspirators within the castle were exposed and removed from power, and the magical wards that had flickered under attack were restored to their full strength. Ilara walked through the halls, observing the resilience of her people and feeling a deep sense of pride and relief. Kale stayed by her side, quiet and attentive, their hands brushing occasionally, their bond unspoken yet undeniable. In the quiet of the evening, they returned to the high tower where their journey had begun. The sun set in brilliant hues of red and gold, painting the sky with promise and hope. Ilara looked at Kale, her heart full, her fear replaced by a newfound confidence. "You have taught me something," she said softly. "That trust is not weakness, that hope is not foolishness, that even in the face of prophecy and darkness we can choose our path. That bond between us, it is the strongest magic of all." The castle was quiet around them, the threat of shadows and betrayal finally at rest. And in that quiet, Ilara realized that her life had changed, not because prophecy demanded it, not because magic compelled it, but because she had chosen to trust, to fight, and to love. As night settled fully over Urindor, Ilara and Kale stood together at the tower, looking out over the kingdom. Stars twinkled above, and the wind whispered softly through the stone walls, carrying a sense of peace and renewal. "Ilara," Kale said softly, "whatever comes next, we face it as one. You are no longer alone, and I am not either. Always together." The dawn of trust had come, and with it, a future they would shape together, stronger, braver, and bound by a bond that neither shadow nor prophecy could ever break. Epilogue hook for a lingering sense of wonder. But Ilara and Kale, united in trust and courage, knew they could face whatever came. The human and the princess, the bond of hearts and magic, had become a force stronger than fear itself, a legend for the ages, whispered in shadow and light.